Hello and welcome to a special episode of James's Mailbag. This is a service I offer for players who've purchased one of my courses, and in this edition we have two questions from Discord member Rage Kips. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he had some questions about the Queen's Indian defense following his review of the course materials. Rage Kip's first question arises after this position. Okay, so it looks like we might be going into a Queen's Indian with knight f3 or a Nimzo Indian with knight c3, but our opponent plays 3a3 instead. And we can reach a very similar position in the Queen's Indian with the moves knight f3, b6, then a3. Which is a course position, and he really wanted to know, well, what do I play when they played this move order? And, to be most precise, you should just play d5 and try and play a Queen's Gambit declined where white has for some reason played a3, and that equalizes pretty easily, but it's a very different sort of position to what we're normally getting in the course materials in the 4a3 Petrosian variation. So I'm going to suggest after a3 we still play b6, going for our normal setup. Obviously white could play knight f3 and would have a full transposition. So the critical line then must be knight c3, preparing to push e4 on the next move. So we need to stop that. We're going to do that with d5. We're not going to do that with bishop b7. And the reason we do it with d5 is if we played bishop b7, there's nothing stopping them from pushing d5 because we would have 1, 2, 3 pieces attacking the square, and they would have 1, 2, 3 defenders. I can do it in these colors. So they'd then be able to push d5 and e4 very quickly. We don't want to allow them to push d5 and e4, so that's why in this position we would meet knight c3, which threatens d5 with d5 ourselves. And now you should just get something that's very similar to the course materials. So a sample line would be, this is the most popular line in the database, cd5, ed5, reinforcing our control of this square. Bishop g5, fighting for control of e4. Bishop e7, unpinning. Very importantly, we still have some control over e4 we can take with the pawn if they played it. So e3, bishop b7, and then knight f3 transposes back into the main line, well, a main line, and the line that we're talking about from the course continues like so. Castles, bishop d3, knight bd7, castles, c5, rook c1, and now knight e4, where play might continue, bishop takes c7, queen takes c7, and we're fully back in course materials. Our position here is to improve our remaining pieces, usually with rook fe8 and rook to c8. We really want to fight for control of this e4 square, and we have a long-term plan of pushing c4, a6, b5, b4, and trying to win with our 1, 2, 3 on 2, 3 on 2 majority. So that's your long-term plan. So the critical point is here we meet knight c3 not with bishop b7 but with d5. One other detail here, instead of c takes d5, they might try bishop g5, and now you want to play bishop e7, which is more accurate than bishop b7, so unpinning. They'll normally now play e3, and then bishop b7 will just transpose back. The point being that now if they take in the middle, you can actually take with the knight, and that's attacked, and you can recapture here if need be. So this would just be a totally fine position, or you can even go in for something like this and still play bishop b7, and we still have our very strong control of e4. So small details, but that's how you want to handle this a3 move. Rage Kips also asked about a c4 move order. So we meet that with b6, as covered in the third course. And specifically this position when for all intents and purposes, white could have played d4 at any point in time and just transposed back into a mainline Queen's Indian, but instead they play with d3. And he said, well, how do I handle this position? What are the differences? And so from this critical position, we can immediately make a few observations. Well, firstly, white does not have as much space with a pawn on d3 as opposed to a pawn on d4. But at the same time, our normal way of moving forward in the position with knight e4, f5, d6, this sort of transposition into a good Dutch isn't possible. And why is it not possible? Well, we don't have the e4 square available for the knight, so we need a different plan. You've got two options here. The most principled is just to immediately play d5, usually followed by c5, and go into a hanging pawns type structure. You might like that. You might not like that. That's totally reasonable, and 7d5 is 0.0 according to the engine immediately. I have a background playing a lot of hedgehogs, Sicilians, Queen's Indians with a d6 pawn as opposed to a d5 pawn, which is just, what the course is built around. So for me, and my recommendation in this video, I recommend 7c5. And what we're trying to highlight here is white did not play d4 in one move, so they don't have strong control of this dark square in the middle of the board, and we're going to fight for control of that dark square and actively fight for control of d4. That's phase one. White normally continues with e4. They could play a move like bishop g5, it wouldn't change anything. We now want to play d6. After they play e4, we are a little bit worried about them pushing e5, so this fights for the e5 square as well. And you can see already we have very good control of the central dark squares. h3. The idea of h3 is just to prepare bishop e3, fight for d4, but without allowing knight g4 at a bad moment. Now knight c6. And the point is not to... It's very important not to play knight d7. Well, why? Well, firstly, we're fighting for both of these central dark squares, and the knight on c6 does an excellent job of fighting for those squares. The knight on d7 doesn't. The second point, and really the critical point, is our long-term plan against this structure is to push d5 at the right moment. And the queen on d8 supports pushing d5. If we put the knight on d7, the queen on d8 does not support pushing d5, so there'd be disharmony in our pieces. So the knight absolutely needs to go to c6. Bishop e3, rook c8, developing another piece, makes sense to me. Now, the most popular move in the club database is actually a3, and I think that's just because white doesn't know what the plan is in the position, but this illustrates our point really, really well. So we've mobilized our pieces about as well as we can. The only other improving move we could really look at is rook e8, but that's not necessary. Instead, we're going to continue with just d5. And after this pawn break, it's very likely that black is playing for an advantage. The position's even according to the engine, but as you'll see with how the position transforms in the next few moves, black is going to have easy and natural play. So the main move has been cd5. It's worth mentioning that e takes d5 will transpose. cd5, ed5, ed5, and now, importantly, knight takes d5. And if we stop just here, we'll play a little bit more. But if we stop here and assess, what's happened is white has lost their space advantage. So they previously had 2 pawns on the 4th rank, and we had 1 pawn on the 4th rank. Well, now they have no pawns on the 4th rank, and we have 1. So black has a very small space advantage. Further to that, we have a healthier pawn structure. We have 1 pawn island, 2 pawn islands, and they have 1 pawn island, 2 pawn islands, 3 pawn islands. So we've got healthier pawn structure, and there's going to be this critical issue of this isolated d pawn on a semi-open file. So black is also strategically better here. It's not a huge deal. It's not like black is winning or anything, but black has come out of the opening with a very comfortable position, and some winning chances. So it's a massive success. Now, you might ask, okay, well, what about this line? Knight takes d5, queen takes d5. There is an x-ray here. Well, the critical point is that exactly right now, on this move, white doesn't have a good discovery. So we can meet any knight move, any knight move you can imagine. I guess I could also go here, with just queen d7, when the queen is going to be very well placed and we can double on the d file against this pawn. You don't want to tempt fate though, so depending on what white plays next, you probably just want to play queen d7 anyway, and then just follow up with rook f d8, and we're going to have a very nice position, and then just continue maneuvering like normal. But you've got a long-term plan of going after this d3 pawn. And if you can win that pawn, you're very close to winning an endgame with this 3-on-2 majority. So that's a very simple way of handling the position, and one that I really like, and that's what I would recommend. Very simple. So c5, develop your pieces, put the knight on c6, play for the d5 pawn break. If we go back a little bit after we play d5, it is possible in this position for white to play e5, and this is just a small detail to know. It's stronger to push forward with d4. It's because we don't want to go passive and start fighting for this pawn or about this pawn. We want to blow the center open, so we don't want to go passive. So e5, d4, which is a fork, by the way, so we are winning back a piece no matter what. E takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now not only are we winning back a piece, we'll have to give back a pawn, that's fine. We've got even stronger control of these central dark squares now that the bishop is on f6, and indeed the bishop is extremely strong on this diagonal. So very similar to the main line, we've broken through in the middle, but now we've also gained even better central control, and this is a better version, a better position for black than we would have achieved if they just followed the normal move order. So I hope that answers RageKip's questions. In this video we've covered what to do when through an English move order white goes in for a Queen's Indian defense but plays d3 instead of d4, and we've also looked at this slightly strange 3a3 move order where we're recommending just pursuing a normal Petrosian Queen's Indian defense, but critically meeting knight c3, not with bishop b7, but with d5. So I hope you all find this very helpful. If you have questions about any of the content in my courses, please feel free to send me a message on Discord or through the contact form on the ChessGoals website. And if I think it makes sense to, I will gladly record you your own episode of James's Mailbag. So until next time, I look forward to seeing you on the Discord. Thank you.